Okay, this is part two of the self-portrait drawing video. Today we are going to look at placing the neck and starting to add different values and textures to the face. So as you can see, it does look a little bit different than at the end of video number one. I went ahead and sketched in the rest of the glasses just for placement. And so we can jump into the values today for part two. So I am going to look at sketching the placement of the neck today. And what you're going to want to look at is on your photo, look at where the lines of the neck are meeting. So can't see too much of my neck right here, but you can kind of see where it would be right here. And of course, on the left side of my face, it's pretty clear where we can see that line. So what we're looking at is we want to look basically at a few things. So first, the angle of the neck. So is your neck line pretty parallel to the center line of your face? Is it more angled? It really just depends on how were sitting in the photo. So with my neckline, let me just kind of outline it right there. There is a little bit of an angle to it. For the most part, it's pretty straight though. And look at where it lines up with the other features. So for example, on my face, it really lines up kind of with the edge of my cheek or where my sideburn is, at least to where the starting point is. There is that kind of angle into it that I need to take into consideration. But you can really measure this a few different ways. So you can measure, from the corner of your mouth over to where that neckline may meet. So, for example, on my drawing, it's about right here, or on my photo rather. So I'm just going to take that measurement. And so there is one eye width right there, and then about a fourth. So exactly a fourth. So 1 1/4 from the corner of my mouth to approximately where that neckline would be, where it would meet my face. So I'm going to find that measurement on my drawing. So there's one, and then it was a fourth going over right there. So that tells me, once I get past all this beard, that my neckline would be in that location. And then there is a little bit of an angle to it. So it's not going to be perfectly parallel to the center line. So when we're drawing our neck, we just don't want to just make any type of line. We want to essentially gauge how long is this line going to be for the side of our neck. So what I'm going to look for, we do have more of a straight line right here, and then it starts to break into the curve of where my shirt was. I'm going to just measure from here to where I really see that neckline stop. So it's approximately in this area. So we're just going to use our measuring tool, and that is exactly one eye width. So it's a pretty easy measurement to find. So this is where my beard and neck start to converge. And I'm just going to set that on my line and right here. So I know that the line of my neck on the left side is going to be in this location. And then it starts to break down and curve where the lower part of my shirt would be. So the next point I'm going to find is in the very kind of edge of my shirt, which was pretty dark. It's right at the bottom of my photo. So when you're measuring your drawing, just look at something you can measure in terms of, if you have some type of shirt line right here, so that would be one thing. Um, or, if that line of your shirt just disappears off the page completely, you obviously don't have to worry about it. But there's still probably kind of a line or curve around your clothing that separates your neck that you want to take into consideration. So for me, what I'm going to measure is, where my beard stops and where this very edge of my shirt would be. Obviously, you'd measure from the chin to wherever, a shirt line or edge of clothing may be. So that is exactly one eye width. So we're going to find this measurement. So I know the kind of ring or collar of my shirt would be right in this location. And so all I'm going to do, I'm just going to mimic the curve that I see in the photo. And so one thing that people usually make an error on is they will make their neck way too narrow. Like they want to kind of make their neckline like right here, and then they almost look like a bobblehead. So you want to make sure that your neck is the correct width. So we're going to do the same thing on this side. So we had marked the neckline right here, and we're just going to go straight up, see where this measurement may be on my face. So it's about right here. Whoop, maybe not right here. So I'm going to take my measuring tool, and it is almost a full eye width. So what I'm looking at, it's about right here. So just short of a full eye width. So measuring from the corner of my mouth, this is approximately going to be, where my neck would line up. So this is where this edge of my neck would be. And I don't have that straight line on this side. So really all I have to do is just starting here, connect that curve to the very bottom edge of my shirt. And part of what I see in the photo is actually a shadow. But once we start working with our values, we'll drop that shadow into its place. So I have my neck, and I just need to add my shoulders and like the collar of my shirt. Another area where people kind of slip up, they'll put their shoulders on their drawing way too low. So they may try and put their shoulder like down here, or they'll try and like kind of round their shoulder like this, and then their torso is much too small in comparison to the rest of their body. So I'm going to erase this demonstration line since that was not right. And so what I'm going to look at is, and what you should look at is, look at where the edge of your shoulder meets into other portions of your face. Or if you have kind of a collar on your shirt, where does that meet on your face? So for example, if I look, my shirt collar, the back side, it ends about right here. So on my photo, if I just sketch a line going across, and since I already have my mouth marked, I'm just going to measure here to where this line is. That corresponds with roughly the top of my shirt. So that is half an eye width. So I'm going to go to my drawing, place that at the bottom of my lip. There's that half eye width mark, and then I'm just going to sketch a line going straight across. So again, we've really just been working with vertical and horizontal lines this entire time. So I know that my shirt is going to emerge from my neck roughly in this place. So I can go ahead and sketch out that just real rough shape of my collar. Now, I may also need to find out, where does this angle of my shoulder start? So what I'm going to look at is this line. And this is the same thing. So if I take my any type of like straight object or sketch a line straight across, I'm just going to put this right here so that it is parallel with my eye line and like the very bottom of my paper. And we want to find where that measurement would be. So this actually looks like it is meeting up with a measurement I already have. So I've already made a mark on my chin when I was measuring my beard. So this mark is still on my paper. So that makes it really easy to find where the edge of my shoulder would be. So I know that my shoulder is going to be right here. And that allows me to start sketching that kind of curved angle. And I just want this to run off the edge of my paper. So don't try and squish your shoulders into the drawing like I just showed, because then it just throws off all of the proportions completely. So just allow that kind of edge of your shoulder to run off the side. So I have the rest of my shirt collar. So we're gonna just kind of sketch this in for placement. So I have this little piece of my collar that sticks up. It's just roughly above maybe a quarter of an eye width if I were just to guess above here. So it's roughly in that spot. So just sketching in the collar right there, and then look for other points. So here's another point or angle that we can find. What does this line up with? If I just kind of look straight up, that's pretty much right in line with the edge of my ear. I obviously already have that point. So I know that that little angle is going to be roughly in that space. And that will allow me to finish that shirt. And then we do have this separation of where the undershirt is and where the flannel shirt is going to be. So this really, what this is doing, it's kind of coming out of the neck right here. And with this, I don't necessarily have to measure it, but if you're not really sure of the placement, definitely keep using your eye measuring tool to find out where any type of like clothing measurement would be on your drawing. So there is the left side of my body. I'm just going to fix this line just a little bit. Now we're going to find the right side. So there is a bit of an angle just kind of based on how I was sitting. So this neckline or the shoulder line, it's a little bit harder to see because it's a lot darker, but I can always outline this. Then we can kind of outline that edge of the collar right there. So I can do the same thing, if I need to find where this area is, I can just look straight up. So I kind of edge my collar, basically where my eyebrow is stopping. So I have that measurement in place. It's pretty clearly marked. So again, we're just working with lines that are vertical or parallel, vertical or horizontal, and parallel to our eye line and that center line that we split our face with. So I know that my collar is going to start right here. And then how far down is my shoulder going to be? So I can do a few things. One of the things I can do is take my measuring tool and just kind of measure how long this line is. So that is really about one eye width down. Or you can just measure across again, like what we've done before. I'm just going to use this technique. But the important thing is that we want to make sure that the angle is correct. So what we're seeing is that this angle is definitely different than how this angle looks. So it definitely has a greater degree to it. Now, we want to try and measure it about an eye width down, which is almost what I have. And then from there, that tells us what the shoulder does. So then it starts to kind of slope down just a little bit from that point. And again, we want this line to run off the edge of the paper. We're not going to try and squish the shoulder in on that side. And then for the rest of the collar, it essentially kind of continues this angle a little bit. There's some slight changes to it, but for the most part, it just kind of continues along its way. And then we'll want to separate the collar from the undershirt again. So that essentially is just kind of starting right here. And then this starts to curve in just a little bit. All right, so we've got the neck, shirts, shoulders, all of that stuff is put in. So essentially what we are ready for is the placement of our values. So one thing you have to consider as you are drawing, your hand is going to be moving around quite a bit all throughout your paper. And as your hand is working on different areas, you're probably going to have some pencil smudging on your hand, which isn't a big deal, but what that means is that you're probably smudging out a lot of areas of your face. So as you're working, I recommend using a scrap piece of paper that your hand can rest on. So that way, when, for example, you're working on the details of your eyes, you have this protective piece of paper and you're not getting pencil on your hand and you're not smudging out a lot of the fine lines and markings that you've made. Now, a lot of the smaller marks that we have right now, we don't need. So obviously, like things like this, we don't need. We no longer need that center line because that obviously does not appear on your face. Don't need the eye line. So any type of like points of measurement that you have on your drawing, you can go ahead and take those out. They're not really necessary. Now, if they're super light, like some of these markings, I'm not really concerned about those because all of those are going to get covered up, especially on areas on your face that may be a lot darker because of shadows or hair texture or like eye color or whatever. So some of those may, they're really not a concern at all. It's mostly where you have highlights that you don't want those markings to show up. So like in my photo, I've got bright highlights on my ear, on really a lot of the left side of my face, my neck. So that's why these markings, I'm going to want to go ahead and take those out. And they may even blend out like as we're using our tortillons, but for right now, we're just going to kind of clean up the drawing a little bit by taking that stuff away. And what's easy to see too when doing this is that you have all of these very angular lines that we used when marking our photo, but all of your face is essentially composed of organic lines. And so this makes these really angular straight lines easy to see and easy to erase. So that way it guarantees that you're not taking up lines that you may actually need that are on your drawing and part of your own face. So once we have all of these removed, what I recommend doing in terms of working with your values is I would work from top to bottom with your values. Now the background I'm not going to do the background right now because the background is something that is going to be pretty simple. It's just a basic gray gradient. So that is something you can kind of tackle as you just like rotate your paper around. Whereas like it's gonna be a lot easier to work with like your hair textures if you're kind of looking at your drawing how it would normally appear. So the first thing we're going to look at is hair texture. So for this, you really want to think about how is your hair pattern, how is the texture of your hair. Think about any type of part in your hair. You know, so is your hair like on this side? Is it kind of like marking down? Is there like spikes or loose ends to your hair? And really, the secret for a lot of this hair texture is keeping these lines going in the correct direction. Now, with my hair texture, obviously, it's pretty short. Um, what I am going to do, I'm going to erase this kind of hairline I sketched in simply because my hairline isn't like sharp and clean like that. My hairline's just kind of made up by very short cut hairs. But basically, for the hair texture, you're really just going to use a lot of hatch lines. So wherever that hair color is darker, you want to put those hatch lines together. You know, put them really close. That's going to help emphasize any type of dark value. Now, where the values may be a little bit lighter, so for example, like when we're getting over here, put those values and textures so they're a little more spaced out. And so this may seem kind of tedious, but it is very important because most of your face is going to be composed of tonal shading. And the hair texture and the hatching is important because that is going to help establish what the hair is and what the values of the skin are, where it's much smoother. And you don't have that kind of like coarse line texture that you're probably seeing in your photo. So again, as you're working with your hair markings and the texture of your hair, think about the direction and pattern that your hair grows, or the direction that you are parting it or combing it or styling it. So if you have any type of like part that you may be working with, so say for example, it's like in this area, your hair is probably and the lines are moving this way on this side. On the other side, they're going to move the other way. That's really important to think about. And that's something that, if you can't see real clearly in your photo, it's something just kind of based on your own self and how you style your hair. And so this type of hatching and the hatching lines, I would use this very same technique when I get to like my beard and sideburn texture. Now, if you have longer hair, if you are creating outlines, kind of like what we did here, essentially you're just going to use the same technique, but your hatch lines are going to be a lot longer. Now, the important thing is to look at the areas of your hair um, where shadows may be. So, if your hair is long, there's going to be a lot of depth to it. So, typically, with longer hair, like the hair close to the necklines, is going to be really, really dark. Even if your hair color is lighter, it's because that hair back here behind the neck, light can't get back there. So it's trapped. And so that's a lot darker. Now, wherever hair is more accessible to light, those highlights are going to be really bright. Even with like hair that's really dark, wherever the light is striking it, we want those highlights to stick out. So just continuing this hair texture here, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to take a little break from this texture and just show an example of how you can maybe work with another type of hair texture. So when working with like a highlight, for example, in hair, So let's say the hair is moving this way. So I'm going to be using some longer hatch lines. And so the hair is like really dark at the end and it's starting to kind of lighten up. And what it does, it's going to hit like a really bright highlight. So what I'm going to do is with this hair texture, I'm going to let it just kind of stop with these lines. And notice the direction I was using these hatch lines. So my hatch lines were going in this direction. Now, I want to create a really bright highlight here. Now, I could do it where I take my eraser and I like erase out that highlight. So that's definitely an option. But if the highlight's really, really bright, the eraser is going to have difficulty capturing that. So what I'm going to do is using my pencil, I'm going to go back the other way. So I'm now going to go this way. And I don't want my pencil marks to essentially invade this highlight. So I'm using these really kind of quick, almost like snapping of the wrist type hatch lines. And so what this is doing, it's creating this natural looking highlight where the light may be really, really bright and it's bouncing off the hair. So if your hair is really dark, this is an easy way to capture that light highlight. And then, if you have to, if you need to put a few just kind of lighter kind of pencil lines in, you can. And once you kind of have that highlight made, then just kind of continue on your way, working with the direction and lines that you see in your hair. Now, in an ideal world, if I had longer hair, this would be a lot easier to demonstrate. So um, I will demonstrate this in class, and I can work with you individually if you're unsure how to approach your hair. So you can obviously see like how I'm starting to take this hair texture on in my own photo. Now let's look at the eyebrow texture. So this is very similar to the hair. Think about how your eyebrows are shaped. For example, on mine, my eyebrows kind of start out this way and then they start to kind of curve over this way. Then these hatch lines are going to flatten out a whole bunch really above the eye, and this is pretty typical on most people's eyebrows. And then the direction may change a little bit, like on the side. So, for example, if I'm working with my eyebrow texture, and when you work with these hatch lines, start at the bottom. So essentially, you're kind of starting at the root because each quick hatch line mark, and the pencil I'm using is a B pencil. When using these marks and starting from the bottom, it that snapping texture of your or snapping direction of your wrist, it's going to create those really sharp, kind of fine pointed lines that you see in your eyebrows where the hair is ending. So like my eyebrow, they start like this, and then those lines start to curve over this way. And when working with your eyebrows, just notice where are those darker spots, because your eyebrows probably aren't just one value. I mean, they may be, but most likely they're going to be maybe a little bit darker at the root, for example. It's pretty normal. And so I've worked with just kind of a basic outline shape of my eyebrow. And you want to make sure that that outline shape essentially doesn't show up anymore because then your eyebrows are going to look very almost like photoshopped on. So yours may be very sculpted in terms of the shape of them. So you may have like a pretty clear cut shape, but I guarantee if you look really close, there are probably like just a few kind of stray hairs that do have some line work that kind of break from that shape. So I need to kind of redirect these lines a little bit. And then part of my eyebrow really just kind of disappears underneath the glasses frame. And I'm gonna just add a few more hairs. So there I have one eyebrow in. I would obviously need to go in and place my other eyebrow. The shape of this eyebrow is definitely different. The values are different. A lot of these dark values that are right here are pretty consistent on this side, not so much on this side. There's a lot of different lines and things over here. So when looking at your skin values and the textures on your skin, probably the most important thing is that on your drawing, the white paper of your drawing, really just reserve that for the brightest spots on your photo. So for example, on mine, I have this kind of bright edge of the lens of my glasses. The metal piece on my glass or on my eyeglasses frame is pretty bright. I have some brighter specks of light within my iris and just outside my iris and on my pupil. There's this bright kind of lens reflection here, here. There's it's kind of some lighter areas on this ear, but for the most part, I'm going to have value all throughout my face, even on like my cheek here. I want just a little bit of pencil value. Otherwise, if I have big pockets of just white paper, my face is going to look really flat in areas. So, w- for this part, when you're working with your skin values, what I recommend doing, if you don't have a lot of pencil on your tortillon already, just take like your 6B pencil or even the 4B and just put some pencil, kind of scribble it on a scrap piece of paper like this. And you can really use this like a paint palette. So I'm going to take my tortillon, or just blend on top of this pencil value that I just had put down. And then I can take my tortillon and just start in with my skin values. And so the most important for this exercise is to ensure that you're putting your values down in the right direction. So even though the tortillon makes really smooth marks, it doesn't really leave a lot of lines. It is still important to make these lines go in the correct direction. Otherwise, it will have a tendency to flatten or to misshape your face. And so just think about the shapes and curves of your own face. And so, like this area that I'm working on now, where I have my temple, it's kind of indented and then it starts to curve over to form my forehead. Need to break this part up just a little bit. And if you blend in a circular motion, kind of like you're sanding something, that'll help get those skin textures really smooth. So not only are you blending in a circular direction, but you're also trying to blend it in that direction um, to shape your forehead. And so, like, I still have my eye line right here, but because this part of my drawing is a little bit darker, I wasn't too worried about it. I knew it would probably get covered up. And so, as you are working with your tortillon values and these smooth tonal shading marks, think about pressure also. The more pressure you put down, the darker your marks are going to be. If you let up and lessen the pressure just a little bit, it is not going to be as dark. So I can still kind of see this line on my face. So I'll probably have to end up erasing that. And then I'll have to tonal shade over that part again. But again, this is an advantage to this method over the grid method, because on the grid method, you would have lines all over your drawing. Whereas with this method, you really just have a few kind of marks and lines that you either have to, whoops, erase or cover up. So it's a little less tedious in terms of kind of touching at parts of your drawing. Now, I haven't done my beard texture right here. I'm starting to put in my tonal shading marks, which is okay because really, you have to think underneath your hair and you've got skin. So I can still kind of see the outline of my beard, so I would know where those marks would be. So it's really not a big deal because I can go back in with my tortillon or my B pencil and I can work with these kind of hatch lines that would make up my beard texture. And so this also kind of provides a sense of naturalism, just kind of putting these hatch lines over like any type of tonal shaded area of your drawing. So the texture on my face with the beard, the beard hairs are a little more sporadic and chaotic. So I'm just kind of following the basic direction that I know that these hairs form and move in. They're also definitely not as straight. They're kind of there's a little bit of a curl to them. But I'd still want to notice like where are these darker parts? Like right here on my sideburn, it does get a little bit darker. I'm not going to move too much into this because I know that I still have some work to do on my ears. If you are working with glasses, things like these kind of hot reflections that show up in the glass, this is something that you can take a couple different approaches. You can like very, very lightly sketch those in. So that would tell me that this area of my glasses has to be really, really light. Essentially in the rim of the glass, it's going to have a white line to it. But then it does this gradient effect where it's kind of a middle gray and then it fades into this like brighter spot. So for example, using my tortillon, and I do have a little mark that I'm going to want to erase. And so the trick for this part is that I have my glasses frame, which I haven't even really detailed too much. I may come back around later and kind of thicken this frame edge up kind of like this, but I'll have to do it throughout. I have that little sliver of light right there. So as I'm using my tortillon, that's the part I'm going to skip. So I am just going to leave a little kind of sliver of just white right here. And if you accidentally cover up something that's really detailed like that, you can just take an eraser and kind of erase that back out and then just touch it up with your tortillon. And so what I need to know is that in this area of my face, these values have to be darker than what those appear. So right now, the value that is in this reflection is already just slightly lighter than what is right here on my face. So that, that tells me that I need to kind of darken the values on the right side of my face. And with this side of my face, this is where the shadows are. I wasn't really getting a lot of light on that area. And then, if that's a case of I just ended up making that too dark in the first place, I can just take my eraser and I'm just very lightly, not even swiping at it. I'm just kind of like touching it with my eraser and almost like a stippling type texture to pull up some of that pencil value. And then when I start working with these, I'll need to make sure that that is dark. So that way there's that contrast. And then right here where my eye socket starts to form, that is quite a bit darker. For something like that, it's okay to just jump in with, like your 4B or 6B pencil, and you can put in some of these values. So this really starts right at that eye line. And I still have some of these original markings for my eye, but again, I'm not too concerned about that because right around this eye is quite a bit darker. So a lot of those initial sketch lines will probably get covered up. Now I do have this other kind of bright hot spot that shows up in my glasses. So I can just take my pencil and lightly sketch that in. So where that is, I want to look and see what it lines up with. Um, the point almost comes to my glasses frame, and then the edge of it comes right to the edge of my iris. And I have that marking where my edge of my eye is. And so that marking is really right in the middle of this hot spot. So it means that if I know that this is here, that would probably be in this area. Kind of an angle to it. And then there's an angle down like this. So basically, this whole area is going to be really, really light. So I already have a lot in there. So if I just take my eraser, I'm just going to erase that out. And so that's probably not going to look very natural. But what I can do is after I erase this out, using my tortillon, I'm just going to very lightly blend this area just so it looks kind of like blurred and out of focus. And again, if this is something that I end up getting too dark, I could just take my eraser and kind of use the same technique where I just kind of go over and like not necessarily swiping because then it'll take up too much, but just kind of like stippling my eraser over that little part of my eye. So right now, I've started adding my values. We're kind of on the verge of, working with that realism in terms of all the values of the face. Obviously, I'd still need to jump in and do the iris texture. And so just think back to some of those practice drawings we did where we were working with the hatch line and the iris. This is something where you can probably want to look at the original digital photo so that you can zoom in really close to see a lot of those textures. Other things like in my drawing I'd want to look at, so like the eyeglasses earpiece, that's pretty dark right there. And then like with the plastic in here, this is a little bit lighter, this highlight, and it gets really dark right here. It continues to be really dark right there. Kind of got this like darker edge. I need to add that little kind of metal uh, clip or whatever that is in my eyeglasses. So I'm going to just sketch in the shape of that. And then I can use my tortillon to go around the rest of that. And I'm going to use my 4B pencil just to kind of touch up some of these dark spots on my glasses. So again, the key for this drawing is we want a nice variety of values. So that way it really does have that kind of sense of realism in your photo. If you're just kind of working with, for example, one value on the cheek, well, that isn't really the case. On my face, you can see this like darker kind of curve value on my cheek right here, and then there's a little bit of a highlight. Then we have kind of that darker value where um, kind of comes off the nostril wing, like in this area. And then it's a little bit lighter, or it is lighter in this area. We have the shadow of the nostril fold right here. Underneath the nostrils in this area is going to be darker. So think about all of those different values in your own face and what you were seeing on the photograph, and that'll really help you in terms of making your photo or making your drawing look very similar to the photo in terms of all of these values.